Good morning. Today I'm going to talk about one of the resurrection appearances in Luke's Gospel, and it's an important one for me because it raises a dilemma which I'm going to try and resolve. Here it is. I'll just read it out. It's from chapter 24, verses 36 to 43. Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and terrified and thought they were seeing a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you frightened, and why do doubts arise in your heart? Look at my hands and my feet. See that it is I myself. Touch me and see, for a ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have." And when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. While in their joy they were disbelieving and still wondering, he said to them, "Have you anything here to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence. Now, this seems to be really ramming home the message that Jesus' resurrection appearances were very concrete and physical, very tangible, even to the extent of eating real food. Jesus is making it absolutely clear that he is not a ghost, because that would be the initial impression that seeing somebody you thought had died might give you, that this is some sort of ghostly apparition. And the tangibility of this, I think, can be related to a couple of angelic visitations in the Old Testament, which are slightly different. In the first one, in the book of Genesis, when divine messengers come to tell Abraham that he's going to have a son, Isaac, he prepares food for them and they eat. But it's not made clear what kind of messengers these are. They're not designated as angels. And I suspect that at that time, when that passage was written, nobody had thought perhaps particularly clearly about the implications of having divine messengers actually eating human food. Whereas in a very much later passage in the book of Tobit, where the companion who has accompanied Tobias in his journey to solve various problems reveals himself at the end of the book as the angel Raphael. And he says, actually, not that you could have told that I was an angel, but for your information, even though I appeared to eat food, I wasn't really eating because I'm an angel and you were actually seeing me in a vision. So by emphasizing that Jesus, the risen Jesus, can not only be touched and seen and heard, but actually eats food, I think this passage is emphasizing the physicality of his resurrection. This is not a ghostly apparition, it's not a ghostly vision, it's not an angelic visitation. Jesus is not to be characterized as simply an angel. But then we're thrown onto the other horn of the dilemma, because if he is sufficiently physical as to eat human food, broiled fish, what on earth is going on? This risen body is eating ordinary food. At a chemical, biochemical, scientific level, one might say, what on earth is happening here? And therefore, the suspicion might be raised that Jesus hadn't, in fact, died properly, that he'd been in a coma and had been somehow revived. But the problem with that is, well, there are many problems with it. One is the complete implausibility of somebody recovering that quickly from the beating and crucifixion that Jesus had undergone. And it is emphasized with equal power in the Gospels and indeed in all the New Testament witness that Jesus really was dead. Nobody doubted that. None of his enemies suggested that he'd been revived in the tomb. The most plausible alternative suggestion they could come up with was that somebody had taken his body away and got rid of it in some other form, and that the resurrection appearances were indeed ghostly visitations or something like that. But what I think is the way to perhaps resolve this dilemma is to consider what actually is the nature of matter. What does it mean for something to be material? And when you actually think about it, when you think about sort of things to do with subatomic physics and the mysteries about what the universe is actually constructed of, I would come to the conclusion that matter is an even stranger thing than mind, than what is ghostly, than what is angelic and non-tangible, that even humble, ordinary matter isn't so humble and ordinary after all. And when in Jesus' resurrection appearances, not only in this one does he eat food, but he is showing his wounds. And now, are they wounds or scars? The text don't make it clear which, but there's certainly visible marks of the suffering he's undergone. And so it seems to be saying, not as though the physicality of Jesus's experience of his suffering, his death, is being denied or in some sense phased away or obliterated. It is still somehow there, and yet it's transformed into something else. We're getting here to the boundaries of human understanding of matter and the way human things can be expressed in ordinary language. So my words and my thoughts, my concepts here will inevitably be tentative and stumbling. But I think what is going on here is something to do with the mystery of matter and the transformation of matter and the unique Christian insight in belief in the resurrection, that matter is important. It's not something to be denied or avoided. It is something that God created. It is in itself good. And what the promise of resurrection is not an escape from the material, but a hope for the transformation of the material. Now, when we are faced in life with the constant deterioration of matter, which is our experience of being in the body, particularly as we get older or we suffer dreadful accidents or diseases, it's very tempting to think that matter is something faintly disgusting, something that causes revulsion, discomfort, pain. It's something we want to get away from. But what the resurrection proclamation is saying is that you can actually have the hope that all that is good and lovely and wonderful about matter can be transformed in resurrection, that after you die, you will not be escaping from the body, but you will be returning to a transformed, a trans-dimensional sort of body, a physicality which is the same you, the same person, but it is in an utterly different yet recognizable form. And that seems to be the character of Jesus's resurrection body. And rather than worrying about how a heavenly being can eat human food, that's making an excessively crude distinction. In his resurrection, Jesus is beginning the ultimate cosmic transformation of matter, not only in his own body, but in the bodies of the humans that God created, and even perhaps in the physical world, the environment in which we presently live, that too will be transformed, not denied, not avoided, not escaped from, but transformed into something wonderful, something rich and permanent, of which we get glimpses in the joy and beauty of the physical world, of the physical bodies we inhabit, even in this life, and especially so in the joy and glory, the glimpse of future glory that Jesus' followers had in encountering his risen body in passages like this one this morning. And I hope that all the materiality and physicality that you experience this day is wonderful and joyful, and that if you face pain and discomfort and deterioration, do not lose hope for the transformation into resurrection.